got this little nugget from our buddy Jordan Schultz over at The Score, friend of the program, Bo. DHop on his way out. What do you make of this?
I make it. He's sick of a losing season, right? He lost. They went 4-13. He was a guy that wasn't the last game he played potentially as an Arizona Cardinal. He had 10 targets and was able to catch one of them. One of them was a catchable pass for 4 yards, and he was able to extend his catch streak. But outside of that, the last few games of DeAndre Hopkins wearing an Arizona Cardinals uniform were frustrating. I'm sure it was just undeniably frustrating for a guy who expects, the most from himself. And I'm sure he expects a lot more from his Arizona Cardinals teammates and coaching staff and front office. I know he was banged for PEDs, but he's a guy of conviction, a consummate professional. And he wants, good things for himself and his team. And he just didn't see any of it, I think, play out. And at 31, you only have so many years in this league. We saw J.J. Watt say this on Hard Knocks. You need to kind of maximize your ability to win and make money. And he's making money, no doubt about it. He's going to make a lot of it next season and beyond. But, as far as winning football games, as of right now, the Arizona Cardinals aren't in prime position to do that.
They are not, at least in the short term. Emma, can we see that graphic one more time for our audio listeners at home? Jordan Schultz saying that the Cardinals, quote, plan to try and trade all-pro wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins this offseason. DHop, of course, as Bo mentions, 2 years left on his deal, $34.36 million left on his contract, and is likely to seek a new deal, which he should. Go get your money, DHop. But this is the big point. Owner Michael Bidwell plans to express this to GM candidates, and I know a lot of people have been around with that last part and saying, why would Michael Bidwell do that? That's stupid. The GM would obviously want DHop in the fold. And yes, to some extent, do you want DeAndre Hopkins on your team? Of course you do. But the amount of money that you have to commit to a receiver over 30 with a team that, in my opinion, is going to need to win a very specific way without Kyler Murray to start next year. I'm sorry. They're not going to be able to throw for 400 yards a game without Kyler Murray. And to Bo's point, you can't maximize DHop without Kyler Murray. I love DHop. He could do that in his early stages with, garbage can quarterbacks in Houston. That's not realistic right now to ask him to do. Plus, the offense needs to evolve anyway and get a run game going, get ample pass protection. So I feel like, again, I'm probably in the minority. I would trade him if I got something worth acquiring, a la a high pick, a pick and a player. The cap release stuff, that I'm indifferent on that because the Cardinals have money to spend with or without trading DeAndre Hopkins. I just think about, if we're talking about long-term, Bo Brock, with this franchise, if somebody offers you a second-round pick, which is a cheap 4-year starter with a new administration, that the new administration is like, I can pick my own second-round pick, I don't have to commit to this money. DHop at most is probably only around next year anyway. Yeah. I mean, it's fiscally responsible.
Right. And it's responsible of a team with its eye on not necessarily they're punting on 2023, but with their eye on a rebuild, a realistic rebuild, and acquiring assets. And the only way you can acquire assets is if you have to give up something. And you look at something that can mutually benefit both parties here, the Arizona Cardinals and DeAndre Hopkins. As much as I enjoy watching number 10 wear a Cardinals uniform and make one-handed catches and just be as reliable as possible when the ball's thrown his way and make plays with the ball in his hand. Like, I can see that I can be realistic about this. If he's on the team, I'm going to say, great. We get to watch DeAndre Hopkins play football. And to your point, as far as it's not going to torpedo your chances as far as adding talent to this roster because your salary cap strung. The key part there that's not in Jordan Schultz's tweet or his report, it might have been in the story, but the key thing is no trade clause. So DeAndre Hopkins is going to have a lot of leverage here as far as he's going to be able to dictate where he goes. This is going to be similar to Tyreek Hill. Obviously he's a little bit older than Tyreek Hill. He's coming off the 6-game suspension. He's coming off of a sub 1,000-yard receiving season, but he still showed that he can play at a high level. They're not going to get a first-round pick. I agree with your point there. When you look at the wide receivers that were traded, and there was a bunch of them last offseason, they're all in their 20s. Like Hollywood Brown was 24. You had AJ Brown it just turned 25. You have Devontae Adams was 29. He was the oldest of them, and Tyreek Hill was 28.
So DeAndre Hopkins, once upon a time, was in his mid-20s.
So, and then they all pretty much, outside of Hollywood, they all got new deals, which, Schultz points out, that's important to Hop, I'm sure, to get that last final deal of his NFL career. Big deal. So look, I think where it's mutually beneficial, it's something you can look at to acquire assets and expedite a rebuild, because that's, as Arizona Cardinals fans, with all the hope that they saw from yesterday, moving off a cliff, moving off some Steve Keim, bringing in a new kind of regime, this is how you do that.
Yeah. You don't want to saddle people with big contracts of players they didn't commit to, even if they're as great as DeAndre Hopkins. And he is great. He's their best player on offense to end the season before his injury, which, again, looks all the more dubious now when this report comes out 3 days after the fact. But, Bo, to your point, DeAndre Hopkins is going to approve a trade if a team trades a premium pick for him, a day 2 pick, and wants to give him more money. Like, you're committing to DHop knowing you're going to give him a new contract. Why wouldn't you accept that if you're not going to get that, presumably, in Arizona? I know a lot of fans are like, just extend him, just extend him. That's not good business with where the team is at. Is it great if he's on the team next year? Of course, but reducing a cap hit for a receiver that's missed time each of the last 2 years, I mean, that's a team that I know Chicago already traded their second for Chase Claypool. I'm not sure they're going to double down, but I would say look at a team with a young quarterback, right? I mean, you could even talk about like a Pittsburgh or somebody that drafted a quarterback in the last 2 years, rookie contract that has ample cap space. You can go nuts. What if the Jets wanted to do that, right? Look at these teams that have taken quarterbacks that are trying to uptick their offense each of the last 2 years. And speaking of the draft, Bo, we're so conditioned because Steve Keim was so horrific in the draft. It was awful. Think about day 2 receivers. Let's go back to last year. The 52nd overall pick. What if I told you the Cardinals for DHop could get pick 52? Some people might be happy with that. Some people might be disappointed. George Pickens went 52 overall last year, 800 yards with dirt Kenny Pickens, 15 yards per reception. And if that's what you get year 1 from a second-round receiver trending up, I think most people would be happy with that return. And I'm not saying they have to take a receiver if they trade DHop for a second or a third-round pick or multiple 2s or multiple 3s. But, man, I just feel like Hopkins has been so elite for so long, and the Cardinals have been so poor at player development. It's like all or nothing. We can't trade Hopkins. He's our best good player. We have to have hope and focus that whomever they hire as the general manager can hit on some picks in April.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then look how bad the offense was without DeAndre Hopkins in the lineup for the first 6 games. Look, that was Cliff Kingsbury's offense.
That's gone.
That was Cliff Kingsbury calling the plays. That was Cliff Kingsbury not being able to, lift up an offense without their wide receiver 1 for not only the first 6 games of this season, but the games that DeAndre Hopkins missed on the back end of last season. That wasn't just like, that wasn't a Kyler issue completely. Like, he was part of it, but it was mostly on Cliff Kingsbury's inability to put players in position to be successful without their top wide receiver out there. And you won't have that issue any longer, whether it's, DeMeco Ryans potentially with an offensive coordinator, whether it's Sean Payton. Like, we can talk a lot about, how Sean Payton can supplement the wide receiver room without DeAndre Hopkins. But look, I mean, you look at this, you could reunite him in Cleveland with Deshaun Watson. You could make that look appealing because immediately, like people would be like, he's not effing going to Cleveland. He's going to waive that. He's going to waive his no trade clause immediately. No, it's like he's got a rapport. He's got a history with Deshaun Watson. Maybe he wants to go play with him again. Or
what about Lamar in Baltimore? If they get
Lamar,
that deal done,
absolutely. It's the East Coast. You grew up in South Carolina. You're a short flight from where you grew up. I think depending on what happens in Carolina, who they get as a head coach, who they get at quarterback, that's, a stone's throw from where he played college football and grew up in Clemson, South Carolina. You got a lot of intriguing
How about
teams.
the New England Patriots?
Right. I mean, that's the easiest one that you see. They've been seeking reliable wide receivers for a long time since Julian Edelman retired. It's so, as far as like you could probably, and Bill Belichick doesn't emphasize drafting as much as top draft picks as much as most organizations do. He might be willing to part with a 2nd round pick for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. There's a bromance there already.
Absolutely.
So much respect.
And they've missed so many times on receivers. A local product here, N'Keal Harry in the first round before A.J. Brown and company went in the second. Horrendous, right? I like this in the chat. Rafa 30, the New York Giants, right? Who aren't paying anybody anything. And they're in the postseason this year. Can you name me one New York Giant wide receiver? It's very difficult, right? They got rid
Richie
of James.
James. Come on. No, I mean
Kenny Galladay's terrible.
Yeah, but he's not gonna waive his no trade to play with Danny Dimes.
Oh, I don't know about that. Big market New York playoff team. Let's not say
that. No way.
I don't care where he goes. And I know a lot of people in the chat, could you trade him in division? There doesn't seem like a fit within the division. Everybody has good receivers, and I don't think the Rams are going to be in a position to take on salary. It looks like, we'll talk about this later, thank the good football lords above. They're about to blow that shit up. McVay's about to walk away. There are spots the Cardinals can trade DHop where they are going to get a quality return to be able to kickstart this rebuild. And even with Michael Bidwell saying yesterday that he thinks this is a quick turnaround, well, yeah, you have Kyler Murray. And if Kyler Murray's humming, you can win any game. And that's with or without, I believe, DeAndre Hopkins. I think Kyler Murray, when he's at his best, can win games with Hollywood Brown and whomever else they bring in. I'm that bullish on Kyler Murray. I don't think Kyler is overly dependent on DeAndre Hopkins. I think that was a manufactured Cliff Kingsbury fallacy within this offense, that there was no creativity. They didn't move DeAndre Hopkins around. You've had your window with DHop, I believe, and now it's time to maximize it.